say, yes, it's getting worse, because they will see the violence of the last few days is definitely things getting worse. So it's interesting how different people define what getting worse is depending on what are the things that we let affect us and what things we let say, okay, this is something that happened, it's an incident, and there's another incident. And if there are 20 incidents, and even if there's an intifada, it doesn't necessarily mean that you see things as getting worse, even though you may worry about sending your kid to Jerusalem on the bus or something.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how you say, okay, things are, you're a little bit more sensitive, and that's the way it should be, to how things are going on the other side. So like there is a lot of frustration, I think, amongst people like the last few days about Palestinians not being able to condemn, and sometimes not even be able to show empathy or understanding that Israelis are concerned about the murder of the Henkin family and the stabbings, etc. And we don't necessarily understand that even someone who, one of my best young Palestinian friends, who he almost got fired from a job working in a settlement, because when they caught, he was working in the orchards and they were catching, there were birds that got stuck under a net, and we didn't want the birds to eat the fruit, and someone told him, kill the bird. He couldn't harm a fly. And when it came to the murder, it's obvious to me that he can't condone it or approve it, or even, I don't even know if he can understand it, but he couldn't put a like on a Facebook page that was condemning it, or even just showing, there's some people who will say, okay, I will condemn violence, and say stop the violence and stop the occupation. They find a way that they feel they have to put it into context, and they relate it. But he just ran out. He couldn't do it, and he was confronted by the person who made the post. How come you didn't like my post? He said, well, because if I like your post and someone in my village sees the post, what are they going to think? So if there's and we don't understand the dynamic of the society, or we're not really, or we're not willing to accept or justify that kind of fear, when it's expected of us, rightfully so, that we should come out and condemn and do whatever we can against violence. And there's, I think, a lot of different reasons why they don't, and one of that is that social thing. And another thing I try to tell people, I don't know, and it's even going to be harder for us. Now we have people who are active here who are asked, is throwing a rock at a car, is that an act of violence which is not justifiable? And there are a lot of Palestinians who are here who wouldn't be able to answer that question, saying throwing a rock at a car in the West Bank, is justifiable. I don't know if they think it's justifiable doing it in Jerusalem or only in East Jerusalem, or what the spectrum is there of where does terror start?
Let me just ask you just said that there's people who participate here,
Yeah.
who think that throwing rocks is justified.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you go like that, but sometimes they won't say it's justifiable. I was standing with Yazan and asked him, well, where does terror begin? Throwing a rock, no response. Throwing a Molotov cocktail, no response. Even when I said suicide bomber, he couldn't answer. And I think that he was really considering. I don't think the answer was that he thinks it's good, but I think that because he lives, we talk about the two contexts. We talk about the human moral side, and we talk about the political context as if they're separate.
Yeah.
Although we do admit that there are moral implications and problems with the way that we're living here in the political context that brought us here. And with 3 years ago, most of the settlers who were in our group would never be able to utter the word occupation, and the word occupation is part of our language now. One of the rabbi who is part of our group says we've created a new language in that we're able to use the political language and understand that it's adopted, even though it's kind of paradoxical that you have settlers talking against occupation, but everyone means something else. Some people say we're not occupying the land, but we admit we're occupying people. and we admit there's oppression of
You got
people.
that from me, or that's someone else else?
I thought I invented that, but who knows? I think people are going through a process that does the same things to us, right? And some people don't like the word occupations; they prefer the word oppression, which I think is almost, harsher. So, it's like a real dealing with it. And I imagine on the Palestinian side it happens too, but we aren't necessarily open to it because we don't have those kind of discussions here all that much. And there's other kind of discussions that most people would like to maybe keep quiet, or in their own communities, or even in their own families, or even only within themselves, and even there it's kind of hard. So like I raised in the email, I said, how many of our of the settlers in our group would differentiate between a rock being thrown at a Jeep and a rock being thrown at a civilian car? For us, if a Palestinian kid throws a rock at a Jeep, that's protected with bulletproof and everything, and gets arrested and gets detained or whatever, we would consider that as being perfectly justified and understandable. Not necessarily differentiating between that and throwing a rock at a car that's on the road. That's civilians driving by, and that's not protected, right? Would you agree that most people wouldn't make the differentiation?
I would agree that
Most of our, even people in our group, and that, but if we talk about it, they understand. Or if we know of someone who was arrested, and we hear like Yazin's friends who have been detained, right? So I think there's a lot more, even though we may think that the security forces are right trying to stop all violence, they'll be more empathetic to the kid in general, I think, and also understand that maybe the army shouldn't necessarily be going into the village with tear gas and continuing the confrontational kind of attitude, or reacting confrontationally to confrontations that maybe start on the other side. For example, like the issue of rock throwing, it is a real problem of kids who, it's not clear to me if it's kids who are spontaneous, or if they're being egged on by adults or by internationals, or a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And the community in Beitul Marwan, their mayor actually changed the times of funerals. When people pass away, there's a funeral. The whole village goes to the funeral, and the kids are left on their own, and they often go down to the main road and throw rocks. And he tried to stop that by cut it back by changing the time of the funeral, so that funerals will take place when the kids are in school. So I mean, the kids are definitely there, and when they're going downtown to throw rocks, the army has to stop it. The question is, how do you stop it, and what do you do after you stop it, and how do you get that cycle of sometimes it's almost cat and mouse. It's like people are looking for that adrenaline thing. It's part of resistance. It's part of proving I'm here. I don't have independence. I'm not free. So the only way I can show that I'm here is by raising the rock, and that just is counterproductive in so many ways. I don't think it's healthy for Palestinian society. I don't think it's healthy for. It doesn't open up any new options.
I was wondering, as you mentioned the latest incidents, the violence, do you think this is in connection to the Abbas speech at the UN, and what is your reaction to it?
I don't know if it's connected to the speech. The worst thing, I don't know, worse. The most logical thing that I was thinking was that I was trying to. Is there a certain amount of violence? What is it? PA security forces are very helpful in holding back violence and stopping terror. Is Abbas interested in showing, if things fall apart? It's not his speech, but it's the whole general situation. If things fall apart, there's going to be an intifada, because if we stop working together, then it's going to be a serious problem. Is there some kind of a way of trying to, in control, let certain things happen in order to give warning to Bibi to be less stubborn? Or is it, something that's bubbling underneath this whole Al-Aqsa thing? It's hard for me to know how much that's that's under it. You know, the people really. I mean, a couple of Palestinians that I've chatted with on Facebook, I don't think our friends really think that Israel is interested in kicking the Muslims off Haram al-Sharif and knocking down the mosque. That's they really believe that, and when I try to show them things that should prove otherwise, then they start falling back on other things like we're being attacked, our lands are being stolen. So I don't know, how much other the buzzwords like Al-Aqsa and other the political things are being used as really as buzzwords or headlines and the banners, sort of slogans to get the people to rise up, or how much those are really the critical issues. I don't know.
Can I ask you maybe how you see the future? You were talking about that it's a new movement and a new project towards that Palestinians, Israeli Jews can come together and get to know each other as human beings and see the other side. And you're not political, you mentioned that. But do you have an idea or a dream, a picture of how life could be for both sides to live together in peace and for both sides not to fear each other but to coexist on that spot of land?
That dream is the two peoples in one
in
land that I
one
mentioned. Like I said, presently there's no hope for it.
And it is political.
Yeah, that is political.
Yeah.
But there's no reason for hope.
Even Ruby Rivlin.
Let's just finish this sentence.
Yes,
There's no reason for hope, except if we manage to play our cards right in this project and build it up to hundreds and thousands of people. Our Palestinian partner, Ali Abawad, has the charisma and the leadership skills to engage and inspire tens of thousands of Palestinians. I think that this is going to sound very, very like prosaic, very little. All what we have to do is manage our activities, our organization in a proper fashion, in administrative, financial sense, to build the groundwork that's going to allow our message to go out to the people of this area. We have a big burden on our shoulders, and if we don't succeed, then lots of people are going to continue to die. And lots of people are going to continue to live in great fear and frustration and oppression.
I have little hope, and I don't think we're going to do much to change it. I think the purpose of our existence is to be able to try to live as good life and show an example of what could be, or of the way to get to what could be. In other words, we're not going to change the reality on the ground, but we can change the kind of discourse, we can change the kind of relationships between people and an understanding of what our responsibilities are. And that way, our lives will be better, even if the general situation is, pardon my French, shit. See, our present leadership with them, it's impossible.
Say it again, please.
You said with present leadership, it's impossible, which could be true.
Leadership, you mean?
Political,
Yeah.
The Palestinians could very well be open to it. It's hard to say. One of the big problems is that politicians talk politically and they do their thing, and all the nice creative things in the processes that could make it change are something that they may think about in their heart, but they don't necessarily let other people know about it. So it's hard to say. The president of Israel, Ruby Rivlin, who is a Likud member, definitely part of the right spectrum. He was a man of the greater land of Israel, believed Israel has to be sovereign over everything. He never believed in a Palestinian state. They shouldn't have their own state. They should be equal citizens of Israel. And he really believed that. I think he's naive to think that he can have a greater land of Israel and give equal rights to Palestinians, and that it'll really be done well. But I think his intentions are true. And he recently talked about the Confederation as a good solution, basically saying, yes, 2 states, but 2 states with open borders and with the kind of relationships that we're talking about. And the movement that started about this is those 2 states in one homeland is out there working already for a couple of years, talking to politicians, talking to international diplomats. It's something that I think, let me throw a challenge to organizations, right? People who say stop the occupation and go every Friday and wave black signs saying stop the occupation, they may be right. But it's like peace and love. It's like everyone who says peace and love, as nice as that sounds, that doesn't really do anything. Peace and love does something at least because it tries to make you think differently. Stop the occupation wants to change reality without helping you, without giving you the tools for changing reality. Okay, so stopping the occupation can be, okay, Israel unilaterally withdraw from all of the territories, right? Like we did in Gaza, and everything will be beautiful. Okay, you might believe that. I mean, the women who are saying stop the occupation with the black things have been saying it for so long that maybe when they were saying at the beginning, they were right. That could have been, it wouldn't have really been a solution because I don't know if at that point there were Palestinians who really were accepting Israel's right to exist. But over the years, things have changed, and the possibilities, naive possibilities of being able to cooperate and live together, I think are rising, and we should make use of that. And if not, so the classical 2-state solution, separation might be a necessary, necessary temporary solution or an arrangement to try to keep 2 societies that aren't mature enough to deal with each other apart.
I don't understand how the religious Jews can think that this is what God wanted. Why did God wanted to create a country built on fear for everybody? He didn't want that. So how come they believe that? Why are they creating a country with fear all over for everybody? Not only the Palestinians, the Jews are living in just much fear as the Palestinians, just a different way. That's not what God wants, I believe.
I think when it started, people were so unaware of the other or blinded themselves, and the situation also historically is completely different. What nationalism was, what the nature of Palestinian society and the Arab and non-Arab and Muslim and Christian and Druze, different kind of populations in Palestine was, the situation of the West and the East. Things were so different then that there was, I think, a blindness, an unawareness.
But no.
I don't think people were looking for the conflict. Well, there obviously were people who were aware there was going to be conflict, like Jabotinsky, even though he was for equal rights for Arabs. It was clear that there was going to be a struggle. It was clear that there was going to be a struggle. I don't know if he thought this was a religious thing or not. Not the original Zionists, who were really the active Zionists, were not religious people. They were atheists, most of them. Mm-hmm. They were dedicated because of Jewish commitment and to values and to history and culture, including moral and ethical values of the prophets. So it's really much more complicated. The question touches me because I sometimes, even though I'm sort of, I identify myself as an atheist who talks to God, wonder what he wants from us with this thing. And since I'm an atheist who talks to God, God is a paradox. God doesn't sit and plan things. And if we look at our traditions, in the biblical tradition, the Quranic tradition, I don't know so well, struggle and conflict is there. The Bible talks about